You may have noticed this flower popping up everywhere in Steven Universe, constantly coupled with the character Rose Quartz. What an odd choice it is to pair the seemingly random flower with a character named Rose Quartz. I mean, Rose is in her name. However, if you delve deeper into it, the choice of a hibiscus is rather fitting. So why the hibiscus? Well, to understand that, we first need to discuss Semiotics, described by Leach, is a branch of linguistics that studies the meaning of words in language, or emphasized by Huford and Heasley, the study of meaning in language. When we discuss culture, we must look at signification. For example, when we look at a rose, we don't see it in isolation. When we see a rose, we don't think of a plant of the genus Rosa, we see a symbol of love and beauty. This is because of semiotics, and in regard to a rose, a result of floriography. Floriography, or language of flowers, was a coded language used widely throughout the Victorian era. Due to severe social restrictions being imposed on citizens, people encoded secret messages into flowers to covertly express things which they could not through words. The book Le Language des Fleurs by Charlotte de la Tour provided people with an easily accessible way to decode this language, with the book acting as a dictionary to explain the meanings behind various flowers. These meanings were influenced by various forms of literature, whether it be mythological, religious, or legend. Although this language slowly faded, remnants of it remain in our traditions today, like as I mentioned prior with roses still being used to convey love, whether it be at weddings or on Valentine's Day. And yet, in Steven Universe we see time and time again the same flower being used to represent Rose. A hibiscus flower. This flower is seen consistently in the show, either being adorned by her followers or surrounding the places most sacred to her legacy. So why this flower in particular? I mean, even other characters connect the idea of rose quartz to the rose flower in the show.
Maybe I shouldn't have picked up roses. Might be a little controversial.
Well, I believe there's a certain text that can help explain this connection. The Bible! Or more specifically, this part of the Bible. The Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, is an odd and often confusing part of the Bible. It's not a sermon or commandment, it's 8 chapters of love poetry. The poems follow a woman, the beloved, and a man, and explores the experience of love and desire through poems that follow the beloved and the man being separated and reuniting. The cycle continues throughout each poem until the final poem concludes, highlighting the power of love being both beautiful and dangerous. The poem ends with these 2 lovers running away together. Poems have been read in a couple ways, but each common interpretation follows that of a god and the love of his people. We can see some parallels already, but how does this poem relate back to the hibiscus flower? Well, what I left out was the immense use of garden and floral imagery, specifically in the Song of Solomon's 2nd chapter, which starts out with this phrase: I am a rose of Sharon and a lily of the valleys. Initially, you may be confused. Rose of Sharon and rose quartz seems like a pretty straightforward link. Here's the twist. The Rose of Sharon isn't a rose at all. The Rose of Sharon has become a common name for multiple flowers and is a common point of discussion between biblical scholars, the hibiscus being one of those interpretations. Although this interpretation of the Rose of Sharon could be incorrect, the show itself points us in the right direction. In the episode Stephen's Dream, Stephen unknowingly dreams in Pink's palanquin, or more notably the place where Pink Diamond was thought to be shattered. This place, while covered in hibiscus flowers, is notably placed in Korea. This place is meaningful because it confirms their suspicion about this flower. The hibiscus is the national flower of Korea. In Korea, the flower represents eternity and is used in association to the Korean War to symbolize resilience and endurance, just like the enduring legacy of rose quartz and her resilience in the Gem War. In Korea, the hibiscus is called mugunhwa, which means flower that never wilts. This is because new bulbs continually replace the old, making it look like the flower never wilts, leading it to be used to symbolize rebirth as well as young death. Let's return back to that passage. The lily of the valley within Christian traditions is most often viewed as a symbol of rebirth and humility. By comparing these 2 flowers, we can assume the passage invoking the second coming of Christ, as well as his humility to sacrifice himself for the good of his people. Another key piece is to note the specific wording. Christ is not the Rose of Sharon, but a Rose of Sharon. He's positioned lowly among a sea of other flowers. Even the choice of flowers mirror that, with the hibiscus and lily of the valley growing on the coastal plain and valleys in which the land was lower than its surroundings. Replacing Christ with Rose, we're going to see similarities. The most glaring one being the early death of Pink Diamond, as well as her rebirth as Rose Quartz. We even see this in the choice of flower, with the Rose of Sharon representing Pink hiding under the name Rose, while truly being a hibiscus. Another similarity is that of Rose lowering herself to live with her people. When Pink chooses the form of Rose Quartz, she gives up her status as a diamond and chooses to live on her colony on Earth as a lowly soldier, becoming an equal rather than a ruler. The other similarity is that of Rose's humility. We first see Rose as this paragon of virtue, a humble and perfect leader. However, the humility goes far deeper than that. Humility is one of Rose's deepest flaws, as it becomes an unhealthy obsession of powerlessness. This powerlessness persists through every action Rose makes. In her role as Pink Diamond, she was the least powerful of her sisters, and as such she is treated like a child. However, when presented amongst lower ranked gems like quartzes, she's profoundly powerful. But still, Rose doesn't understand this. This notion of self-worth manifests in Rose believing her actions are unimportant. However, her actions are the catalyst for much of the show. This extreme humility is her biggest flaw. The second line of the Song of Solomon reads as follows: As the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. The beloved is seen as a lily amongst an expanse of thorns. The beloved is seen beyond reproach compared to the harshness of her contemporaries. This can be seen in Rose's contrasting of the diamonds. She alone is the lily amongst the thorns of an unjust and destructive system. Pink stands out as she calls attention to the ways in which the diamonds control and dehumanize the gems under their power. Pink stands apart from the diamonds, not because she's perfect, but because she's the one diamond humble enough to admit her faults and fight back against their regime. So maybe the hibiscus isn't a mistake. Maybe it's the perfect flower to represent her. Rose isn't characterized by the flower we may initially expect, but doesn't that reflect her perfectly? Rose represents what we expect Rose to be, a delicate, perfect, loving being. However, she is a rose of Sharon, a hibiscus, hiding under the veil of a rose. So maybe it's not just a flower. Maybe it's a confession to her past life, an emblem of her overbearing humility, her rebirth as rose quartz, and her enduring resilience in the face of a corrupt system. Maybe it's the flower she chose to be, not the one we expect her to be.
When a gem is made, it's for a reason. They burst out of the ground already knowing what they're supposed to be, and then that's what they are. Forever. But you're supposed to change. You're never the same, even moment to moment. You're allowed and expected to invent who you are. What an incredible power. The ability to grow up.
Wow. Those would make some pretty good lyrics. Hold on. Watch our